Hello everyone and welcome to this new video tutorial, Photoshop Tools, and today we'll be looking at the Marquee Selection. The Marquee Selection is right here. It's the second tool in your toolbar, and when you right click on it, you'll have four options. You have a rectangular marquee tool, an elliptical marquee tool, single row marquee tool, and single column marquee tool. So let's take a look at the first one, which is the rectangular. So basically when you're going to drag, you will create a selection. Let me turn off my feather first, and I'll talk about feather in a few seconds. So when I click here, I selected my rectangle and whatever I'd like to select. If you get into the center of your selection or inside the selection, you can pick that selection and move it somewhere else. Now if you hold the letter Alt and you make second selection, you are deselecting this area. If you're holding the letter if you're pressing Shift, you're adding to that selection. So Alt is a minus and Shift is a plus. Now the next thing is that when you are creating that selection, what I just explained to do with the Shift and Alt is located here as well. So as we said, each tool has its own attributes that is popping here when they're selected. Now I have a couple of options here. This is where you will add to your selection. This is where you're going to remove from your selection, and this is where you will intersect your selections. So you can work with that or make your life easier. Hold Shift and add, hold Alt and remove. Now concerning the second area here, the feather. What is feather? Feather is going to create a gradient over your selection when you delete. So let's do the test here, and what we're going to do is that we'll select the letter S. Let's zoom closer. And if I hit the delete on my keyboard, let me get my layer selected, I removed that square because I have a feather of 0, so it's going to make a perfectly straight line. Now let's go and select our T here, and rather than 0 in our feather, we'll put, let's say, 20, and let's hit enter. Now that it's at 20, if I come back to my selection here, select my T and hit delete. Now if we zoom closer, you will see the difference. This one is perfectly faded, created a gradient of opacity, while this one is a straight edge. So if I want to reduce it to selections in a clean way, I have to use my feather there and play with that. Now if we do the same thing, but rather than getting with something too high, we try and get with something that would be pretty nice for what we'd like to do. And 20 is too much, so let me decrease that to 12 and get myself a selection from here, so I can go grab my A like this, and let's hit delete. Now I have a pretty good average between the two of them, and I have a nice feather at 12. Let's redo that on an area where it's going to be much more visible. Let's come over here. Let's get around the rocks and let's play with our feather. So I have my first selection. Let me turn off my feather to 0. And we'll do this one with the second piece. As I said when I started, you have rectangular marquee and you have elliptical marquee tool. So let's go select my elliptical. Let's create a first selection with 0 feather. Delete. Let's create a new selection with a 12 feather, and let's create a new selection with a 25 feather. Oops, I'm sorry. This and delete. Now look at the difference. 0 feather, 12, and 25. So this is what feathers can do, and very often you need to use feather because it will clean your edges, and that's one of the ways that will make an object feel like it's floating over the other object. Now I'll go back to the rectangle here and take a look at the next option here. Normal, fixed ratio, fixed size. Normal, what it's going to do is that I can create the shape or the size that I want. If I go with fixed and I define it as 24 by 24, what's going to happen is every time I click, I created a selection out of that size. Let's make something bigger and go with 50 by 50 here. And I'm creating that perfect square. Let's go even bigger. Let's go with 200 by 200. So I'm selecting the exact same size out of my image. And finally, fix the ratio is that I'm not deforming it in any way. My x and my y are always equivalent, so I'm always making squares here. And finally, normal enables you to do whatever shape you'd like to do, as long as it's within a square or rectangle. So I'll just go back to elliptical, and it's pretty much the same thing. I have my feather, but I don't have the sizes, except if I go with fixed ratio, it will always be perfect circle growing. And if I go with a fixed size and I go with 200 by 200, now I will just create circles out of that exact same size. Concerning the single row marquee, it will create that perfect line of 1 pixel, so it can be useful to create maybe certain patterns or get yourself a look at what your perspective looks like. Otherwise, it's not what I mostly use. This was concerning the rectangular and elliptical marquee, shortcut M. Thank you very much for following, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll be discussing the polygonal lasso tools. Thank you.